Archiving History. Let's explore.
March. When the rains lift, the highlands of Ethiopia transform. Clouds swirl off green plateaus. Streams pulse with melted mist. Yet, in 1896, this gentle landscape bore witness to one of the most defining moments in Africa's history. Few outsiders understood this land. Its mountains weren't merely terrain, they were history, memory, and defense. Ethiopia was not a colony in waiting, but a sovereign power, ruled from castles older than some European nation. This is the story of the ambition of empires, and a kingdom that outlasted every flag planted in African soil. Its borders challenged, its spirit never conquered. Ethiopia is a land of extremes, from the peaks of the northern highlands rising above 8,000 feet to the scorched lowlands of the Danakil Depression. Its terrain is rugged, unforgiving, and deeply protective. For centuries, it shaped not only how Ethiopians lived, but how they fought. To outsiders, this fractured geography once seemed a sign of weakness. In the 1890s, many European powers viewed Ethiopia as backward, divided by language, ruled by tradition, and waiting to be claimed. Beneath that misjudgment lay ancient dynasties, Christian kingdoms, and fiercely independent communities that had resisted Ottoman pressure, Arab encroachment, and now, Italian ambition. Menelik II, crowned in 1889, understood his country's terrain was its armor. Unity here was not tidy. It was local, tribal, spiritual, but it was real. The crisis came by treaty. In 1889, Italy presented Menelik with the Treaty of Vucale. The Amharic version promised friendship. The Italian version, unbeknownst to Menelik, declared Ethiopia a protectorate. Rome spread the lie across Europe. Ethiopia had submitted. Menelik responded with exposure. He republished both versions side by side, calling out the deception. It was not a retraction. It was a warning. By his side, Empress Taytu Betul saw even deeper. Fluent in Amharic, sharp in statecraft, she read the implications instantly. This was not diplomacy. It was conquest by signature. She once said,
"Those who sign away their independence from fear of war might watch as women rise when men falter."
Italy was not used to defiance. It had recently seized Eritrea and now aimed to use it as a launch pad. Roads were built, outposts fortified. The kingdom was ready to force its false treaty into fact. Menelik and Taytu answered with action. They sent word across the empire, not with decrees, with calls for unity. Nobles were asked not only for troops, but for their sons, their horses, and their harvests. Ethiopia mobilized. From the Semian Mountains to the hills of Gurake, warriors came. Ras Mikael of Walla, Ras Alula of Tigray. Each brought hardened fighters. Ethiopia's army swelled to more than 100,000. Oromo, Amhara, Tigrians, Gurage, and others. Speaking dozens of languages, flying dozens of banners, but moving as one. Italy, under General Oreste Baratieri, believed it faced a rabble. He commanded just over 10,000 men, supported by cavalry and field artillery. He had firepower. However, Ethiopia had the highlands and the numbers. The Italians weren't just marching into Ethiopia. They were marching into a wall of memory, strategy, and bloodline. Menelik had not built an empire of silence. He let Rome press forward just far enough. Then came the reply. It began in the northern highlands, at a mountain pass called Amba Alagi. The Italian forces, led by Major Pietro Toselli, had fortified a position on the slopes, believing their artillery and defensive posture would hold. But Ethiopia knew the terrain, the rocks, the folds of land, the choke points. It was theirs. Leading the Ethiopian charge was Ras Makonnen, one of Menelik's most trusted generals, and the father of the future emperor Haile Selassie I. Alongside him, Ras Betul, Taytu's own brother, moved in from the opposite flank. Ethiopian forces executed a pincer movement, striking from multiple ridges. Taseli's men were surrounded, their lines fractured, their retreat impossible. Over 2,000 Italians were killed or captured. Taseli himself was gunned down in the chaos. It wasn't just a victory, it was a message. The myth of European military supremacy had cracked in the dust of an East African mountain. While Italy reeled from the shock at Amba Alagi, Menelik's forces moved toward the fortified Italian garrison at Mikael. Roughly 1,200 Italian troops had barricaded themselves inside the fort, supplied with food, water, and ammunition, enough, they believed, to last indefinitely. However, Menelik didn't attack head-on. Instead, he cut off their water. Rather than wasting lives in an assault, Ethiopian forces surrounded the fort and waited. They blocked the well, seized surrounding high ground, and disrupted all supply routes. Inside the walls, thirst became a weapon. Morale collapsed. After 15 days, the Italians surrendered. Then came the surprise. Menelik let them go, unharmed, allowed to return home with their weapons. To many in Europe, this act was baffling. Why show mercy? But to Ethiopia, it was not weakness. It was calculated. It sent a signal. We are not savages. We are sovereigns. And it tightened Menelik's diplomatic position abroad. With their lines thinned and pride wounded, Italy tried to regroup. Unfortunately for them, Ethiopian forces were relentless. In February 1896, the two sides clashed again at Endagabat. Ethiopian troops, led by Ras Mikael of Wolo, launched a series of harassment strikes on Italian positions. These attacks disrupted supply convoys, exhausted Italian morale, and forced their soldiers into defensive formations, preventing them from reorganizing. The Battle of Endagabat was like a tightening snare. By the time the Italians moved toward Adwa, they were tired, undersupplied, and psychologically outmatched. Each battle created more pressure, tested Italy's patience, and stripped them of their confidence. Yet the final reckoning was still to come. Menelik conducted battle from 8,000 feet above sea level. His infantry followed him silently up narrow passes. Meanwhile, Empress Taytu led a separate force of her own. Ethiopia's terrain gave them the advantage. Steep ridges, narrow defiles, and dense undergrowth concealed entire divisions. Locals guided routes unknown to foreign maps. Together, they cut off Italian supply lines. Each supply wagon was ambushed, each inch of ground contested. Taytu positioned 5,000 troops on a mountain ridge, an advance guard, and wired communications with couriers who carried messages in pockets sewn inside of clothing. Back in Rome, Italy felt victory slipping. Baratieri hesitated, unsure whether Menelik was bluffing or actually ready to fight. On March 1st, in 1896, at dawn, the Italian army advanced toward Adwa Plateau. Mist clung to every slope. Soldiers stepped into unknown terrain. Shots rang out. The Italians had miscalculated nearly everything. Their maps were vague, their logistics stretched thin, and their scouts had failed to detect the full extent of Ethiopian positions. The terrain was unforgiving. Sharp ridges, sudden valleys, and narrow passes turned every movement into exposure. Their ranks, divided by poor coordination and the land itself, marched into natural kill zones. Italy also underestimated Ethiopia's numbers. The steep flanks of the plateau amplified the defenders' advantage, with fighters appearing from rocks, trees, and ledges. Menelik unleashed 12 field guns, concealed carefully along strategic elevations. Then came the cavalry, followed soon after by the synchronized infantry, attacking from 3 separate but coordinated sides. The chaos was total. Italian columns were split. Officers became prisoners of war. Some even jumped off cliffs to avoid capture. It is estimated that 7,000 Italian troops died, with another 1,500 captured, including General Matteo Albertone and General Vittorio da Bormida. Ethiopian casualties remain uncertain, but their toll was far lower and borne with reverence. As the smoke cleared, the land stood quiet once more. Broken, perhaps, but free. Ethiopia had not only defended its borders, it had shattered an empire's myth. Italy was humiliated. Under the Treaty of Addis Ababa, signed in October 1896, it formally recognized Ethiopia's sovereignty and surrendered its claims over disputed territories in the Horn of Africa. For a European power, this was more than a military defeat. It was a diplomatic collapse. Italy had expected to return to Europe with Ethiopia listed on colonial maps. Instead, it came back with its general's disgrace and its ambitions undone. Internationally, the treaty was met with quiet astonishment. European powers, especially France and Britain, were forced to reevaluate their assumptions. The press in Paris and London acknowledged the scale of Italy's failure, even if uneasily. Ethiopia's survival as an independent state in the face of European expansionism was deeply unsettling to the colonial order. Menelik II, however, did not gloat. He used the moment to consolidate internal power, reinforce diplomatic ties, and build infrastructure. Though victorious, Ethiopia would face new challenges, balancing modernization with autonomy, managing regional rivalries, and navigating the cautious admiration of foreign powers now forced to treat it as a legitimate peer. Yet Adwa had already done something greater. It had reset the narrative. Menelik became a continental symbol of defiance. He had defended his nation not through isolation, through strategy, diplomacy, and bold unity. News of Adwa spread rapidly. In Harlem, churches rang bells. In Port-au-Prince and Kingston, it was whispered in sermons. In London, anti-colonial thinkers printed pamphlets praising Ethiopia's stand. For generations of black leaders, Marcus Garvey, Kwame Nkrumah, Malcolm X, Adwa was not just victory, it was vindication, proof that Africa could stand, that colonialism was not destiny, that African victory wasn't a myth, it was memory. Mountains carved in stone, of people woven together by ancestry, terrain, and purpose. At Adwa, two rulers, Menelik and Taytu, declared that sovereignty was not negotiable, and a modern empire learned that it would take more than rifles and treaties to conquer 1,000-year civilization. Adwa was more than a battle. It was a statement of memory, of dignity. It was the refusal to be forgotten or defined by foreign maps. What does it mean to truly defend sovereignty? Not just with weapons, but with unity, belief, and vision. And if history can be shaped by willpower in the mountains of Ethiopia, where else might it still be waiting? Would you like to learn more? Check out our website and subscribe at archivinghistory.com.